There were 2 cops, 1 drone, and a woman in a pastel sweater yelling, "Contain the rainbow!" And me? I was barefoot on the driveway, sipping an oat milk latte, watching my 6-year-old get frisked for sidewalk chalk. Is this a dream? Did I black out and wake up in a parody of Law and Order, Crayon Unit? Boom. The drone crashed into the trampoline. Glitter. Everywhere. I didn't flinch. I just adjusted my sunglasses and whispered to myself, "Okay. So this is how suburban anarchy begins. How did we get here?" Spoiler, it started with a purple dinosaur and a smiley sun. And 1 clipboard that should have come with a warning label. Artist palette. Before we unravel this pastel-powered nightmare, hit that like button if you think chalk isn't a crime. Crayon subscribe if your HOA has ever gone full dictator over something harmless. Speech a loon and drop a comment below. What's the pettiest thing you've ever been fined for? Bonus points if it involved glitter, gnomes, or any form of unauthorized joy. Sidewalk vandalism. The crayon rebellion begins. I was holding a juice box in one hand, and a police report in the other. Across the cul-de-sac, a 6-year-old was being interviewed, next to her chalk drawing of a smiling sun with sunglasses. Karen stood behind the officers, arms folded, lips pursed, wearing a shirt that said, "Respect the rules or regret the wrath." The crime? A rainbow. Drawn. On. The. Sidewalk. Apparently, in this HOA, childlike joy was unauthorized street art. A violation of surface aesthetics under Clause 4.7b, which, according to Karen, prohibited unapproved messaging on communal cement. My kid had drawn a cat. A pink one. It was smiling. Now there's a case number. One of the cops, bless his soul, looked as confused as a golden retriever at a calculus exam. The other was trying not to laugh as Karen insisted the drawings were psychologically destabilizing to passers-by. She pointed at a flower with a face. "That's not regulation flora," she said. And that's when I knew this wasn't about chalk. This was war. Before we get into how my front yard turned into the epicenter of a protest movement led by toddlers with sidewalk chalk and a dream, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you think crayons aren't crimes, and drop a comment telling me the dumbest thing your HOA has ever lost its mind over. Because this story? It doesn't end with an eraser. It ends with a full-blown art revolution. From sunshine to subversion, how we got here. Let me rewind. It was a Saturday. The kind of Saturday where nothing big is supposed to happen, just coffee, cartoons, and maybe pancakes if we're feeling wild. My name's Claire. 37. Graphic designer. Mom of 2. Passive-aggressively tolerated by my HOA. We live in Willowglen Meadows, a name that sounds like it should come with deer prancing through the yard and a HOA that sends you muffins, not fines. Spoiler, no deer. No muffins. Just rules. Rules about mailbox fonts, trash can curfews, and now, apparently, chalk-based terrorism. It started so small. My daughter, Ellie, age 6, asked if she could draw on the sidewalk. I said yes. Because I'm a reasonable human who believes in art, imagination, and not handcuffing Crayola creativity to a legal document. So, she and her little brother Max grabbed their chalk and got to work. It was cute. Wholesome. The kind of stuff that makes people slow their jog just to smile. They drew a sun with sunglasses, a unicorn with roller skates, and what I can only assume was a 2-headed dinosaur tap dancing on a rainbow. The usual. Then came the clipboard. Karen. HOA president. 72 years old, though her spirit is 1,000. She walks like she's delivering divine judgment, and talks like every conversation is a courtroom deposition. Clipboard always under her arm, like it's surgically attached. Sunglasses that reflect your soul. Lipstick that hasn't moved since Reagan was in office. She stopped right in front of our driveway. Stared at the sidewalk like it personally insulted her HOA handbook. Then she gasped. And when Karen gasps, the paperwork begins. I was sipping coffee on the porch, not even bothering to hide the smirk. I figured she'd mutter something about visual harmony and keep walking. Oh no. She whipped out her phone, snapped photos like she was documenting a crime scene, and radioed someone on her little walkie-talkie that said HOA Tactical in glitter label maker font. I kid you not, 15 minutes later, a white HOA branded golf cart pulled up. 2 volunteers in khakis and matching windbreakers stepped out. One of them had a measuring wheel. The other had a printed version of the HOA bylaws, double-sided and spiral-bound. Karen pointed to the sun Ellie had drawn. "That," she said, "is a non-regulation celestial body." My jaw dropped. "She gave it sunglasses," I said deadpan. Karen flipped through the bylaw binder like she was searching for a biblical prophecy. Page 47, subsection 9a. No markings or illustrations shall be placed on communal surfaces without prior review and artistic approval by the HOA Visual Harmony Subcommittee. I blinked. "You're telling me she needed a permit to draw a smiley face?" Karen adjusted her visor. "Correct." And just like that, I realized I wasn't living in a suburb. I was living in a satirical dystopia held together by laminate, printable fines, and HOA cosplay. The next morning, I found the first citation taped to our mailbox. Unauthorized artistic expression, first offense. And right then I knew we had 2 options. Scrub the chalk, apologize, and grovel before the crayon inquisition. Or let the kids finish their masterpiece and start a rebellion. Karen calls the cops over a rainbow. By Tuesday, the sidewalk art had evolved into a full-blown Nero movement. Ellie and Max had recruited half the block's under 10 crowd. Little hands gripped chalk like protest signs. The pavement in front of our house was now a masterpiece, a pastel ocean of smiling suns, rainbow dinosaurs, dancing muffins, and one very bold declaration in bubble letters. Art is not a crime. It was adorable. It was chaotic. It was, apparently, grounds for an emergency HOA meeting. At 9 a.m., I received a printed flyer, delivered by clipboard courier, that read, "Urgent notice, unauthorized artistic defiance, Lot 22. HOA Directive 3.9.2, all non-permitted visual markings must be removed by 12 p.m. Tuesday or risk official action. This includes drawings, phrases, and any depictions of animals performing human activities." Karen had underlined phrases twice. At 11:53 a.m., Karen returned. With backup. Now, when I say backup, I don't mean a neighbor with a broom. I mean police. Yes. She called the actual police. Because of chalk. 2 squad cars rolled up like we were running a rogue art gallery. An officer stepped out, looked at the drawings, then looked at me. "Ma'am, we received a report about vandalism?" I gestured to the cartoon donut Ellie had drawn with a top hat and monocle. "That's the suspect." The officer blinked. "Seriously?" From behind him, Karen stepped in like she was unveiling a crime ring. "They refused removal. They ignored the citation. They're spreading unregulated imagery." The second officer was trying so hard not to laugh. "Karen," he said, reading her name tag, "this is chalk. It washes off. Today it's chalk," she snapped. "Tomorrow it's graffiti. Then gang signs. Then," she motioned toward a stick figure doing a handstand, "moral collapse." "I drew that one," Max said proudly, holding up a green piece of chalk. Karen looked at him like he'd confessed to organized crime. The officers conferred quietly, clearly trying to figure out if they were legally allowed to walk off the job. One eventually turned back to me. "Look," he said, "technically this is public sidewalk. And technically, there's no law against chalk. So we're gonna call this a misunderstanding." Karen gasped like she'd just been stabbed by the Constitution. "You can't just let them deface public space." "Karen," the other officer said deadpan, "it's SpongeBob with a unicorn horn." But the thing is, Karen doesn't lose. Not without a fight. So the next morning, the HOA launched their counteroffensive. They called it Operation Visual Purity. 7 volunteers in khaki hats and HOA armbands arrived with scrub brushes, buckets, and laminated cleansing permits. They came to erase the chalk. But they didn't know what they were walking into. Because word had gotten around. Parents, neighbors, and a few rogue teens from the nearby high school were already on the sidewalk. And this time? The drawings were bolder. Defend the doodles. No peace without pastels. Karen equals fun police. And right in the center, a massive chalk mural of Karen herself, sunglasses, clipboard, and all, being hugged by a cartoon dinosaur saying, "Let kids be kids." The cleansing squad froze. Karen screamed. Max offered them chalk. They retreated. And the next phase of the war began. The chalkocalypse goes viral. By Friday, the sidewalk wasn't a sidewalk anymore. It was a canvas. A revolution. A full-blown pastel uprising. Parents brought folding chairs. Teenagers showed up with GoPros. Someone wheeled in a cotton candy machine. The art stretched down 3 entire blocks now, murals, messages, and memes. A chalk Mona Lisa with sunglasses. A rainbow tiger riding a skateboard. One brilliant 8-year-old drew a courtroom scene titled, "Karen vs. Joy." Then came the banner, hand-painted on an old bedsheet, tied between 2 trees like a flag at the edge of occupied territory. It read, "Welcome to the Vandalism exhibit. Curated by children. Opposed by Karen. We'd built a pop-up protest museum. And people came. Not just from the neighborhood. From other HOAs. Other cities. Local news. A journalist showed up and asked Karen for a quote. She screamed into the microphone. "This isn't art. It's anarchy!" Which, of course, became a meme within the hour. TikTok blew up. One of Ellie's chalk videos got over 3.4 million views. Hashtags were trending. Hashtag Crayon Rebellion. Hashtag Chalkana. Hashtag Free the Sidewalk. Then, and I'm not even making this up, a local art supply store donated an entire crate of sidewalk chalk. In support of young creatives resisting clipboard tyranny. Karen? She went nuclear. She printed off a 25-page cease and desist, attached it to a yard sign, and staked it in front of my house. In Comic Sans. The sign read, "This is not a museum. This is a violation." And right as she was finishing, Max, my 6-year-old warrior of whimsy, climbed up onto the trampoline in the driveway, dipped a big sponge in glitter glue, and bounced once. Twice. And on the third jump, he let it fly. Splop. Right onto the HOA's sign. Karen shrieked like the bylaws had just been rewritten in crayon. And then, the final blow. A letter. From the city council. Turns out, someone, not naming names, but maybe a certain neighborhood mom with a talent for filing paperwork and petty vengeance, had submitted the entire chalk exhibit as a temporary public art installation. With witnesses. With documentation. With a petition signed by 173 residents. The letter read, "Per the city's temporary art and culture protection ordinance, the exhibit currently present on Cedarwood Lane is to be preserved for 14 days as a protected, community-driven cultural event. Attempts to alter or remove the artwork within this period may be considered civil obstruction." Karen held the letter like it had been forged in Mordor. The HOA had lost. Defeated. By glitter. By rainbows. By sidewalk joy. The final mural, drawn by Ellie and 3 of her friends, showed a smiling clipboard waving a white flag under the words, "Let kids draw." Mic drop. From chalk to change, and one very salty Karen. The next day, Karen was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it she'd locked herself inside her house with a stack of HOA bylaws and a tub of Neapolitan ice cream. No one confirmed it, but we did find a shredded copy of the Visual Harmony Manual in her recycling bin. It was damp. And possibly tear-streaked. The neighborhood? It bloomed. Parents who never spoke before were now organizing. Chalk and Fridays. Max got a standing ovation at Show and Tell. Ellie was officially declared Minister of Sidewalk Art by her second-grade class. The sidewalk stayed covered for 2 glorious weeks. Even the rain didn't stop us. We laminated the art. Bought chalkboard paint. Someone donated a roll of clear tarps so the unicorns wouldn't smudge. But more than that, something shifted. We stopped whispering about the HOA. We stopped tiptoeing around Karen. Instead of fear, we had group chats. Instead of fines, we had potlucks. And where there were once beige sidewalks, there were murals, memories, and kids who believed art could actually change something. It started with a crayon. And it ended with a community. Not everyone stayed, of course. Karen stepped down 3 months later. Said she was moving to a stricter HOA environment. Last we heard, she tried to ban inflatable pool toys in her new neighborhood. She was promptly voted out. Again. As for us, we got the city to create a creative expression zone on our street, a fancy way of saying, "Chalk welcome here." Max calls it the Freedom Lane. Ellie still draws her pink sun. And I just smile every time I step outside and see that rainbow dinosaur waving at me like, yeah, we did that. If you've ever been fined for having too much fun, if your HOA thinks joy needs a permit, or if you believe kids should be allowed to draw a cat without a citation, then smash that like button, hit subscribe for more HOA chaos. And drop a comment below. Backhand index pointing right. What's the wildest thing your HOA has ever fined you for? Bonus points if it involved glitter. Or gnomes. Or a trampoline. Because let's be honest. Art isn't vandalism. But micromanagement? That's the real crime.